my understanding of clairvoyance and mediumship, in the little experience that I have of it, because I'm not very clairvoyant, but I'm somewhat clairvoyant, is that it does come in metaphor a lot of the time. Like things come as stories and metaphors. And what's your experience with that, of like translating that or not translating that, or what's the impact that you can see on people, and how does it differ from just telling them to do something and telling them in a metaphor? And if you have some things that come to you as not metaphor, like what's the different, what's the different quality, I guess is my question.
So to speak to the first part of that question, I would say, if there is an ally or a guardian or an angel that's saying something in a metaphor, and whether I interpret that or not, I guess the short answer is it depends. I learned very early on not to assume. I mean, because we all have our filters. We all have how we're taking in information. How someone's going to hear a metaphor. Well, they may hear it on so many ways that we couldn't possibly imagine. So I'll just give you a really quick example. One of my first times like partnering up with someone, this is like decades ago, and we're like, okay, the person's going to ask a secret question and they're not going to tell you what it is, but you're just going to start talking and seeing what the images you have. And it turns out, so the question ends up being from my partner of what should I be doing in retirement, because she was near retirement. So that was a very broad question. And the images that I had received were like her and her husband are on a bridge, but he's on one side of the bridge and she's on the other side of the bridge. Right. So you think, oh no, right? That's our human mind thinking, oh, that means, and you ascribe some meaning to that. But what was really clear is like my allies were like, no, you just tell her what you're seeing. Don't start translating it, Doris. Just tell her. And when I told her it, she just burst out laughing, and it had absolute meaning for her because her and her husband were bridge players. And she's like, and I go, okay, but I'm sorry, I just don't know about the bridge. Like, why you're on opposite sides? She goes, that's how you play bridge. Your partner sits across from you. So that was a really early on lesson of, sometimes I could have gone the route of, well, perhaps you and your husband are growing apart in retirement, but that wasn't the issue, right? So I learned really to first say what, like, this is what I'm seeing, or this is what I'm hearing. Because it can also, in that description, can really, again, stir something in someone who's completely forgotten and will be like, oh my gosh, I remember this. I was 8. This happened then. Oh, and then they start building on that. And it can really not only be freeing for them, but like this rediscovery. So, but sometimes I will translate. Sometimes I will translate if someone just is really, really like, okay, what does this possibly mean that I'm in the middle of a tree? Like, please help me here. So sometimes we go different ways. It just depends. It depends on the situation.
That's an interesting question, actually, that I hadn't thought about necessarily. Do you run into people who really don't understand metaphor? Like metaphor doesn't speak to them at all?
Yes.
Yeah.
That for sure. For sure. And that's or it's not speaking to them that day,
Yeah.
or that hour, and for whatever reason. So it doesn't mean that they can't ever. It just means in the situation or what's being presented, it's like speaking another language. I just don't.
Yeah, I wonder also if
understand.
it's like relative to the connection to like how mind oriented you are. That some people will really hate metaphors because they need to have very cognitive thinking and understand. That maybe people who want more control over their lives, or who want more control in general.
I think that's that's certainly true. I think it can be what you're used to as well. Like I've worked with English professors. If I'm using a metaphor, I don't know, am I going to be graded on this? But I've worked with like nuclear physicists who loved metaphors and actually, or using it in the language that they're familiar with. Sometimes it's just one word. Just tweak it a little bit, rearrange it a little bit, and then a light bulb kind of go off.